Did Ben Shapiro actually call Tucker Carlson left wing? There's no way Ben Shapiro actually called Tucker Carlson left wing. Benny has got to be clickbaiting right here. All right? He's got to be clickbaiting. Love you, Benny. Let's see what Benny has to say.
Guys, boy, Benny, mommy, and daddy are fighting again. And of course, you guessed it, it's Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro from their different perches inside of different wings of the Republican Party. Man, I would love to see the debate between the two of these guys. And I'm not particularly venomous towards one or the other, but I would really like to see the debate. When Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson debated like 7 years ago, it was one of the most fascinating things ever. They did like a Sunday special at the Daily Wire. Do it again. It'd be very interesting to see headlines like this. Ben Shapiro's on a warpath to purge the conspiratorial cranks from the right. I mean, I don't really think this helps Ben Shapiro, like that kind of framing, obviously.
What is going on with Ben Shapiro these days? Like, this is such a weird dynamic because Ben has gone from, in the past, essentially since before Trump's election in 2016, Ben Shapiro was starting to become a known name, but since Trump got elected, like, Ben Shapiro has skyrocketed to a megastar. I mean, a hugely popular person. Now, I know some people will dismiss his popularity because the Daily Wire basically pumps tens of millions of dollars into Facebook so that the Daily Wire host all kind of get signal boosted on Facebook, and a lot of boomers and older people become fans of people like Ben Shapiro because it just shows up in their feed, and it just basically is like subliminal messaging at that point in time. But ultimately, Ben Shapiro is still a big star. He just is. He's a massive star within like the conservative movement and things like that. Is this because Tucker is basically bigger than him? When Tucker was on Fox News, he was a Fox News person. So it's almost like there was no competition because Tucker was part of the machine. So once Tucker became an individual and an independent person, it's almost like Ben Shapiro has felt threatened by that. Does that make sense? That's what it feels like to me. It feels like Ben Shapiro is threatened that Tucker Carlson is bigger and more influential than him.
But Ben Shapiro has, been taking what I would argue is more of a mainstream establishment Republican wing take on a lot of issues for the country and a lot of issues for America writ large going forward. Tucker Carlson instead has been pushing the Overton window and pushing and sort of, I think probably for good reason, breaking some paradigms that many conservatives have grown up with and that have been reinforced in the party. And I think that's also like very, very good. The newest breakdown, thermonuclear breakdown between the two of them, literally has to do with nuclear weapons. And Tucker Carlson saying that he totally opposed the use of nuclear weapons in World War II. Here's Ben Shapiro's take on that, with Tucker Carlson's take kind of baked in here from Joe Rogan.
There's a weird horseshoe theory thing that's happening here. We've talked about it before on the program, that you have this constellation of far leftists who are rather friendly toward Hamas, who generally are isolationist on foreign policy, but they're isolationist on foreign policy mainly because they believe that the United States is a nefarious force in the world. They're sort of Howard Zinn or Noam Chomsky with regard to American foreign policy. America is actually bad. That horseshoe theory has now swung all the way around, and it includes some people on the right. Now, as we'll talk about in a moment, when it comes to isolationism, as we've discussed, there are a bunch of different perspectives within the isolationist perspective. There is the we should not get involved in foreign conflicts no matter what perspective because we need the money here at home, which means that you're also in favor of cutting spending by the government on a wide variety of other subjects. There's also an isolationism that suggests that whenever America gets involved in foreign conflicts, that tends to taint the United States, not it's about the United States tainting the rest of the world. But there is a theory that has now arisen on the right that there is something deeply malign about the United States, something deeply wrong with the United States. This was made apparent over the weekend. Tucker Carlson was on Joe Rogan's show. Obviously, I'm very friendly with Joe. I think Joe does a great job during his interviews. And there was a clip from this interview that went particularly viral. This is a clip in which Tucker Carlson calls the United States evil for having dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, ending World War II.
By the way, is it pronounced Hiroshima or Hiroshima? I've heard it pronounced both ways. Is it Hiroshima or Hiroshima?
We are looking at how to pronounce the name of the city in Japan. This is normally said as
Hiroshima.
Hiroshima sounds cooler, in my opinion, but I've heard it pronounced both ways.
and then suggest that anyone who would justify that is also evil, which is a very traditionally left-wing perspective. It is not traditionally a particularly right-wing perspective, because most people on the conservative side of the aisle tend to believe that America is a force for good in the world. And as we'll discuss, it turns out that dropping the atomic bomb on Japan was necessary for ending World War II and likely saved millions of lives, both American and Japanese. But here is Tucker.
Well, you could say the same about the atomic bomb, right?
Yes, you could.
And you could say that we have to develop it like Oppenheimer felt before the Nazis did.
I love that. How'd that work? How'd that work?
Well,
I love, by the way, that people on my side, I'll just admit it, on the right, have spent the last 80 years defending dropping nuclear weapons on civilians. Like, are you joking?
right.
That's just like prima facie evil.
Yeah.
If you can't, well, if we hadn't done that, then this, that, the other thing, that was actually a great savings. Like, no, it's wrong to drop nuclear weapons on people. And if you find yourself arguing that it's a good thing to drop nuclear weapons on people, then you are evil. Like, it's not a tough one, right? It's not a hard call for you. It's not a hard call for me. So with that in mind, like, why would you want nuclear weapons? It's like just a mindless, childish sort of intellectual exercise to justify, like, oh no, it's really good because someone else will get it. How about no? How about like spending all of your effort to prevent this from happening?
Okay, actually, what would be childish is to assume that there are no other players in the world, for example, trying to develop nuclear weapons. The fact is the Nazis were trying to develop.
And that's what he meant by him saying that it was a left-wing take, by Tucker Carlson saying that. I can see where Ben Shapiro is coming from that perspective. I don't agree, but I can understand his point, what he was saying. I don't agree with him, but I understand his point. So that's a fair point.
Nuclear
I disagree.
weapons. There was, in fact, a nuclear arms race that was happening at the time. Not only that, as it turns out, the Soviet Union then developed nuclear weapons. And it is mutually assured destruction and nuclear deterrence that has kept the world largely from sinking into another World War III-like mass casualty morass because of the...
Well, Ben, by the way, Ben, Tucker's whole thing is like looking at what the United States is doing now versus what it was doing when Trump was in office. Because when Trump was in office, we didn't have any of this, little Ben. Hey, little Ben, you know, the guy that you were campaigning against because you wanted your boy Ron DeSantis, but Donald Trump is the guy who kept your wonderful Israel safe along with all the other fucking places in the world. But you actively campaigned for DeSantis against Trump, even though Trump did the one thing that means the most to you, keeping Israel safe. But you're sitting there going, we need DeSantis.
The horror of dropping the nuclear bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the first place.
So, yeah, ladies and gentlemen, there you go. This is the question. Should America have dropped the nuclear bomb? Now, I think is quite interesting about this argument between the two of these guys is that it really does show the schism, the massive cratering that has happened between two different wings, the isolationist, more libertarian wing of the Republican Party, and the more establishment warhawk wing of the Republican Party that Ben Shapiro.
I think it's as simple as Tucker Carlson is now on his own, and he's building his own independent media company, and I think that that's Ben Shapiro's problem. I really think that's his problem. Tucker Carlson's always had different takes than your average conservative person. Even when he was on Fox News, he had different takes than your average mega popular conservative person, which is why so many people gravitated to Tucker when he was on Fox News, because he was different. Even though he was there and part of the machine, he was still different, and he felt different. So you would have Sean Hannity saying all of the standard conservative talking points, team player till the end, Sean Hannity. And then you had Tucker Carlson, who would have those similar takes, but he also felt authentic because he would have different takes than your Sean Hannitys of the world. Ben Shapiro never had a problem with that. Ben Shapiro never had a problem with that until Tucker Carlson became independent. And now that he's independent, he's a competitor to the Daily Wire. And he is a competitor to Ben Shapiro. Right there with Crowder, it was always looked at as kind of Crowder and Ben Shapiro were kind of the two biggest names in conservative media on an independent level, and Tucker Carlson's bigger than both of them. And Benny Johnson's going to be in that number 2 spot soon.
Shapiro represents Tucker Shapiro over here. And the two of these people are totally going to approach this issue very, very differently. And they're both coming at it from what they say is a moral perspective. Tucker saying it's morally repugnant to drop the nuclear bomb because the war was already won. The Nazis had already been defeated. Imperial Japan was limping along and, was totally and completely unable to project power outside of like their little island, which was being firebombed and decimated every single day. Also, interestingly enough, like if you look at the raw numbers, the firebombing of Tokyo killed far more people and was far more horrendous than the dropping of the nuclear bombs on Hiroshima or Nagasaki. So maybe you could have just kept doing that. The ushering in of the nuclear age also, and a fact check on Ben Shapiro here, yes, the Nazis wanted to create a nuclear weapon, but they weren't even close. Like the reality was there was somebody working on it.
A lot of this does is like he's saying he's fact checking Ben right there, but like Ben Shapiro, like whenever you get so focused on one, like we've seen Ben Shapiro's meltdown happen over this Israel-Palestine situation. We've seen this thing. This dude went on like retweeting sprees to his like 5, 6, 7 million followers, whatever he has, of just retweeting like the most horrific images imaginable. And you're like, bro, nobody's following you to see this shit. He's going off on people. He's screaming. He's foaming at the mouth. And it's like he's always been someone that was kind of measured and kind of, articulate. He talked real fast and people always memed him for that. But when it came to the Israel thing, like he has completely lost all focus of any type of like reality. And he's just foaming at the mouth of anybody that doesn't line up with what he's saying. In which my problem with it is I was like, well, again, as I said earlier in this stream, but like if Ben Shapiro's number one goal, number one focus, the number one thing that he cares about is Israel. Donald Trump protected Israel. Donald Trump had peace, historic peace. So why were you actively campaigning against Donald Trump? Because you were. Like the Ben Shapiro and Jeremy Boring they were actively pushing Ron DeSantis. They wanted Ron DeSantis. And it's like, you can't sit there and tell me your number one focus is Israel when the guy that literally protected Israel, you're working against him. It makes no sense whatsoever.
His name was Heisenberg, but he wasn't even remotely close to finishing a bomb. It never would have, given the trajectory of where their research was going. Like, really wouldn't have. It would have taken decades. Like, every expert says it would have taken a very long time for them to even come close to even trying, testing something. Decades. They were very much down the wrong path. But it is what it is, okay? The Nazis were trying to develop a nuclear weapon. Would they have developed a nuclear weapon? No. I mean, not certainly in the timeline to have used it before the end of the war. That's a fact. Did the Soviets get all their nuclear technology from us? Well, that's also a fact. There are many, many people that say the reason there was an arms race in the first place was the development of nuclear weapons, and actually because there wasn't a harder line against their use. And that's what sparked.
Hayden for 50 says it's Hiroshima. I disagree with Tucker on World War II. The Japanese were brutal. They used the Red Cross on the helmets of medics as targets to aim for when the European theater there was generally agreement on don't shoot the medic. I'm not going to pretend that I'm some student of World War II history. I mean, I know the basics, but based on what I know and based on what we were dealing with and based on the fact that they attacked us, like, obviously, if you're going to sit there and just ask a person straight up, like, should a nuclear bomb be dropped on civilians? Obviously, if it's presented that way, no one wants to see that. That is a horrific event. I've seen videos of Hiroshima where it's actually thriving, and a lot of people were like, of all this time that's passed, wouldn't it be a nuclear wasteland? You can't really put into words how horrific and devastating something like that is. So yeah, when you're presented with that question, when you were all removed and we got our fucking smartphones and our damn Wi-Fi and our fucking Teslas and we've got all this stuff and you're just sitting there going, should we drop a nuclear bomb on someone? You're like, well, fuck no, that's horrible. But this is a whole different, like, going back that far in that time in those circumstances, it's completely different. That, yeah, if you present a question as that's cut and dry, yeah, of course people are going to go, oh my God, no, that's terrible. But that's not really it's not really what happened. You know what I mean? So that has to be, the context there has to be put into play. So while I probably don't agree with Tucker Carlson on that particular issue, I 1000% side with Tucker Carlson on everything versus Ben Shapiro. Just on principle alone, I side with Tucker Carlson over Ben Shapiro. Maybe I can disagree on that particular topic per se because of the circumstances involved, but I'll still team Ben all the way. We need to put a poll in the chat. Are you team Ben or team Tucker?
Sort of the nuclear arms race in the first place. Who's right? I'm not exactly sure. Like, listen, the dropping of the nuclear weapons ended the war, and war is evil.
Correct.
And I hate the fact that wars happen. The older you get, the more you realize that, like, wars are just two devils fighting each other. It's very, very rare that anybody could ever truly claim to be on the side of the angels.
Agreed, and this is one of the main reasons why, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why I'm a huge Trump supporter, but his ability to not get us in any conflicts, that is a make or break standpoint for me right there. Like, I'm not an anti-war person. I'm all for us using the United States military for what it should be used for and not for the gain of corrupt politicians. And in my lifetime, and all I can speak to is my lifetime, in my lifetime, especially under the Bush administration, but not only just the Bush administration, but I feel like the United States military, in my opinion, has been used for the advancements of politicians and not the safety of the United States of America. That's what I feel has happened. And Donald Trump brought it back to where our military was respected but not needed to be used because they knew if they fucked with him that he was going to crush them. We knew that. They all knew that. Everybody in the world knew that. And that's what I think it should be for. That's what it should be used for. And I've seen, in my opinion, more times than I can count, the United States military has not been used to protect the United States of America as much as it's been used to line the pockets and push forward the business interest for the politicians. Shout out to the no-bid contract for Halliburton. I'm sure that, didn't benefit Dick Cheney and George W. Bush and Condoleezza Rice at all. I'm sure they didn't. I'm sure they got no benefit from that no-bid contract that Halliburton had for the Iraq War. No, not at all. No, not at all.
And so, again, the older and wiser I get, I say, that isn't it, man. That isn't it. However, I can see, the value in ending a war, and the nuclear bombs ended that war and ended it quickly. And so I can also see that. I can see that side. Both of these guys are arguing from a moral perspective. What do you think?
When you have a leader in place of the United States of America who truly is not looking for conflict, Donald Trump proved that there will be no conflict in the United States. The United States they're the Pied Piper. So if the president of the United States of America is a true alpha and a true leader, and he has the true best interest of the United States in mind, then there's not going to be any conflicts with the United States. That's just the truth of it. And Donald Trump proved that. So if the United States is involved in war, in my opinion, it's because the president wanted the United States in war. Because the president has the power, has the leverage, has the authority to make sure that U.S. is not in war if they don't have to be. That's my take on it.
Tucker Carlson has regularly talked about Ben Shapiro and warmongering, and this seems to be like the major friction between the two of them. Ben says Tucker's simply lying about my position. I've called for a negotiated end to the war in Ukraine, freezing along the conflict line early on in the war. Tucker Carlson has been, very, very much on the attack vector of Ben Shapiro, and it has been the wars in Ukraine and Israel, and then issues like the atom bomb. That it's foreign policy that's truly become like the tearing and rending point here. So it is totally interesting. Here's Tucker Carlson's take on people who are calling for war and who, well, quite frankly, Tucker Carlson says is deeply immoral and depraved and demonic.
So I don't really care, but I did think it showed like the level of not just corruption, which I knew, but of like emotional instability and craziness. I mean, there are people, and I stopped reading any of it, but there are people on the right who have spent the last 2 months every single day focused on a conflict in a foreign country as our own country becomes dangerously unstable.
Oh, he's talking about Ben Shapiro right there. He's 1,000% talking about Ben.
On the brink of financial collapse, with tens of millions of people who shouldn't be here in the country. We don't know their identities or the purpose of their being here. Like stuff that's could destroy the country for real and make it impossible for my kids to live here. They've said nothing about that, and they're focused with laser intensity on foreign conflicts. And I'm like, at some point, I've got 4 kids. If I'm so caught up in the problems of my neighbor's children and completely ignoring my own children as they get addicted to drugs and kill themselves, you know, I'm not against helping my neighbor's kids, but clearly I don't love my kids. I mean, that's the only logical conclusion, and they don't care about the country at all. And that's kind of their prerogative, but I do, because I have no choice, because I'm from here, my family's been here hundreds of years, I plan to stay here. Like, I'm shocked by how little they care about the country, and including the person you mentioned. And I can't imagine how someone like that could get an audience of people who claim to care about America, because he doesn't, obviously, right?
Right. Well, I mean, Tucker, we've seen it too on free speech. I mean, people who become multimillionaires, who've made entire careers, who've literally became famous, on this very reason. I know you've spoken about this previously, but it's very important to our audience as well. Is that standing up for free speech rights of people you disagree with is probably the most important exercise, and we've seen some of that come for American citizens on Palestine. How do you?
The problem with standing up for people you disagree with on free speech, and of course I stand by that 100%. I think people that disagree with me should have the ability to say whatever they want and have their platform. The problem is that group of people they don't think the same as you. They think you should lose your platform, and they're getting bigger in numbers, and they are always trying to deplatform people. They're always trying to deplatform. They're always sending hate mobs and false flagging campaigns and all of that. And that's the problem with it. They fucking hate anyone that disagrees with them. And they aren't confident enough in their own positions to allow people that disagree with them to have the same rights that they have, and it's a pretty scary situation.
Work through this too when we're both under such immense pressure, even social pressure of like, how could you support this? Take maybe the context of the university presidents. We've got billionaires like Bill Ackman, I'm curious what you make of this. My assessment is they're upset that they're not included as marginalized within the DEI regime.
Ben Shapiro, of course, has a retort to that, where he says that the Tucker Carlson thing, where I'm just asking questions. This whole Tucker Carlson's signature MO of pushing conspiracy theories by just asking questions, that this is totally wrong and corrupt for conservative commentators.
So what's going on here? I mean, really, it's a serious question. What's going on here with Tucker? So
what's going on, Ben, is you need to change your tampon, buddy. I mean, that's really all it comes down to, Ben. You're still going to be a millionaire. You're still going to be successful. The Daily Wire is still going to be there. And you just need to change your tampon. Tucker is the man. People love Tucker Carlson. And that's just how it is.
Tries to explain it. He says that he was actually radicalized by 2017. That basically, until 2017, he believed a lot of narratives that were told by the government and by the mainstream media. And then after 2016, 2017, when it appeared that the intelligence community was militarized against Donald Trump, this is what radicalized him into basically becoming uber critical of everything. This is his story.
Probably unlike you, I didn't have any opinions like that. I was like, fluoride, come on. 9/11, shut up. Yeah. UFOs, you're crazy. You know what I mean? I just I had this reflexive, I'm ashamed of it. I'm not bragging about it. But it was 2017, and really it was the Trump campaign. It wasn't that I was so in love with Trump, though I've always liked Trump because he's hilarious and charming and all that. But I wasn't a Trumper or anything. But it was watching that campaign, and particularly his claim that they were spying on him. And I was like, really? The intel services and federal law enforcement, FBI, do not spy on presidential campaigns. That's so out of the realm. That's so crazy. That could never happen because, of course, there's no democracy in a system like that. And fundamentally, we're a democracy, an imperfect one. It kind of lumbers along, but it's not fake. And then that turned out to be true, and I knew it was true, and that just blew my mind. So I began a process still ongoing of reassessing a lot of other things. Like, okay, well, if that was not true, what else is not true? And what else that they told me was a conspiracy theory might actually have some basis in fact. And
okay, so in other words, he went all the way from, I believe all the narratives to I believe none of the narratives. In fact, I believe the counter of the set of facts with which I am presented. Now, first of all, let me just say about 2016, 2017. Yes, it is incredibly disturbing that the intelligence community was militarized against Donald Trump on the basis of a bunch of trumped up nonsense from the Hillary Clinton campaign. Also, if this exploded your worldview as a conservative, that I find that surprising. Because as a conservative, you're supposed to be generally skeptical of government power. And not only that, if you know anything about presidential history, you know that a wide variety of presidential campaigns have been.
Oh my gosh, you hit the hot. Can we get that high pitch one more time? That when he said wide variety?
As a conservative, you're supposed to be generally skeptical of government power. And not only that, if you know anything about presidential history, you know that a wide variety of presidential.
Ben, you called Trump racist and sexist in 2015. You called Trump racist and sexist in 2015. You said he hates women. You said all the left-wing talking points about Donald Trump. You spewed that. Now suddenly you changed and you support it? How can you support a racist and a sexist? So I could totally see where Tucker Carlson had this certain view of like how things work, and then the moment that the revelation happens that not only was not only were they spying on Trump, they were spying on him to the exact level Trump claimed it. And I'm sure that opened his eyes to go, what the hell else am I missing? That makes a lot of sense. Presidential
campaigns have been spied on by the administration in power. In 1940, for example, the Wendell Willkie campaign was pretty clearly spied on by the FBI at the behest of FDR. In 1964, LBJ literally bugged Barry Goldwater's headquarters in 1964. Famously, in 1972, the Richard Nixon campaign spied on the campaign of George McGovern, right? That's what Watergate was all about. So actually, there's a fairly well-predicated history of the instruments of law enforcement being misused, which is why there's been a hot debate about the utility of various law enforcement agencies on the right. This has been going on literally my entire lifetime and well before. Okay, but according to Tucker, that radicalized him. And now he went from supposedly believing everything to believing the reverse of everything. Now, that is actually not critical thinking. That's actually not critical thinking. If what you said is, I took in everything too much, too easily without examining the evidence, and so now I'm going to take a stronger look at the evidence before I come to a conclusion, that would be critical thinking.
Was it critical thinking when you blatantly said Trump is a racist and a sexist and a misogynist? Is that critical thinking? Or did you just repeat what you heard based on a few sound bites from MSNBC and CNN? Because that's exactly what Ben Shapiro did. Now, I know he has retracted all of that since. I'm not trying to sit here and throw him under the bus again for something that he did a long time ago. But my point being is that he acts like he's the moral superiority here. Like, I never make mistakes and I only operate with critical thinking. No, you don't, Ben. Was it critical thinking where you told everyone to go get the jab? Was that critical thinking? Because you said it straight up. Go get the jab, you doofuses, or something, or stupid. He called people some kind of disparaging word on Twitter. Go get the jab. You literally you put your entire brand behind that. You put that whole thing like you were pro jab. It was the greatest thing in the world. Was that critical thinking?
But saying that the evidence that is presented to you is now of no consequence whatsoever. That no evidence provided is sufficient because the source cannot be trusted, that they are lying to you, that they're always lying to you, always. And that no counter evidence is necessary to support your new thesis because, again, they're lying to you and they've hidden all the evidence. We are now in the world of the unfalsifiable. Any evidence against your new thesis is discounted by the fact that it's coming from a source that lies to you. And no evidence for your thesis is available. Why? Because they hid it and they are lying to you. So then it comes down to what is the thesis that Tucker is using? What is the narrative that Tucker is backing? Well, as he says, he is using the thesis that every single power that exists in the United States is lying to you about everything, down to the most basic morality of Americanism. Things like, was America right to involve itself in World War II? Was America right to drop a nuclear weapon on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in order to end the war. Now, listen, as always, when Tucker talks, there's a grain of truth to much of what Tucker says. There's truth, a lot of truth, to the idea that a lot of our powerful institutions have been corrupted and that people inside those institutions have used that power in order to lie and change the narrative. But there is a difference, again, between healthy skepticism, a demand for evidence. That's what skepticism is. Right? Being critical, being a critical thinker is a demand for evidence. That is not the same thing as just asking questions. Just asking questions.
You're welcome to be right and wrong in life. I'm going to be right. I'm going to be wrong. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to be ahead of the curve on other things. As I'm someone that talks for a living, and I'm always talking. And sometimes I get things right, and sometimes I get things wrong. And I typically I try to do the most amount of research I can. I try not to talk about things I don't know anything about. So the things that I talk about are things that I generally have some level of interest in and knowledge in, and I try to give an educated opinion on it. But like Ben Shapiro's like presenting himself like I'm better than Tucker because I know how. Shut the fuck up. You're going to make mistakes just like Tucker's going to make mistakes, just like I'm going to, just like Trump's going to, just like every other fucking human being on the planet. You are not better than anyone. And no one's better than you. We're all just human beings, and we have our strengths and our weaknesses. And he is talking down to people trying to act like I'm smarter than you.
Means the search for answers is totally worthless. And all the answers are deemed insufficient anyway. When you start thinking that being a critical thinker is just the asking of the questions rather than critically evaluating evidence and claims and counterclaims, that's wrong.
And this is, of course, dividing the internet, where some people are totally loving this approach, and some people say that Ben Shapiro sounds like more like a blue-haired feminist in debates every single day. I'm for free speech. Ben Shapiro allegedly is going to debate Candace Owens. I'd totally love to see the Ben Shapiro Tucker Carlson debates. I think they'd be healthy. I think they'd be good. I'd be totally in favor of them. More free speech, not less. More abilities for people to confront each other and to speak to each other freely and to learn maybe a little bit. But most importantly, I got to tell you, the older I get, the more I realize how much we have been lied to as a culture, as a movement, as a country.
Yep.
And the lies are always perpetrated by the people who want forever war. Because forever war is the monopoly that is controlled and owned by Washington, D.C.
I agree with everything. I agree with everything Benny's saying.
Evil.
That's right there.
As the more I realize how much, but most.
This is everything he's saying right here. I agree 1,000% with him. And Trump has been the thing that's really opened my eyes up to this because of how much they have lied about Donald Trump. And I've talked about this many times. And I'll repeat what I've repeated 1,000 times. Donald Trump, most famous person on the planet. He's been one of the most famous people for the past 30 or 40 years. He's been in the public eye. Hollywood loved him. The mainstream media loved him. The networks loved him. The news loved him. Everybody fucking loved this guy. Everything that we knew who he was. We knew everything that he was about. We knew he was a cocky, rich guy who liked pretty women, and he liked to build skyscrapers and slap his name on it. We've known who Donald Trump is for decades and decades and decades, and they all loved him. And then as soon as he started to run for president and he started to call out things that he has called out in the past, but the moment he started calling it out from a power play position, suddenly he became the worst human being on the planet, and they started to rewrite history and try to rewrite his legacy. And at that point in time, I'm like, if they can do it to somebody like this, they can do it to anybody. They can do it to anyone. One more time, what Benny says right here is perfect.
Most importantly, I got to tell you, the older I get, the more I realize how much we have been lied to as a culture, as a movement, as a country. And the lies are always perpetrated by the people who want forever war. Because forever war is the monopoly that is controlled and owned by Washington, D.C. It's how these people get rich.
Yes.
And that's totally evil. That system needs to end. It's why we've been at war my entire adult life in this country. And it's why the next war will, once again, like strip mine innocent people of their children, their wealth, and their dignity. And that's awful.
Benny's crushing it, man. And there's a reason that Benny is, oh, crap, I forgot we still had that poll. But Benny is absolutely crushing it. Team Tucker, 92%. Holy shit. The CobraCast audience really, really, really likes them some Tucker Carlson. Holy crap. And while we're on that point, because I did play this video the other day, but I think it's important to play it again if I can actually find it. Yeah, right here. So I played this video the other day. I want to play it again just to kind of further the point that I just made. For those that have not seen this, all right? This is Donald Trump from years and years and years and years ago when everyone loved him, but he gave the same answers then as he's giving now. But now it's a problem. But this is the guy that they have retroactively tried to tell you is the worst person in existence. Right here. Here we go.
1988, Oprah Winfrey posed a significant question to 42-year-old Donald Trump, whether he would ever consider running for president. Trump's response during that time is a notable piece of history.
You took out a full-page ad in major U.S. newspapers last year criticizing U.S. foreign policy. What would you do differently, Donald?
I'd make our allies, forgetting about the enemies you can't talk to so easily, I'd make our allies pay their fair share. We're a debtor nation. Something's going to happen over the next number of years with this country, because you can't keep going on losing $200 billion, and yet we let Japan come in and dump everything right into our markets and everything. It's not free trade. If you ever go to Japan right now and try to sell something, forget about it, Oprah. Just forget about it. It's almost impossible. They don't have laws against it. They just make it impossible. They come over here, they sell their cars, their VCRs, they knock the hell out of our companies. And, hey, I have tremendous respect for the Japanese people. I mean, you can respect somebody that's beating the hell out of you, but they are beating the hell out of this country. Kuwait, they live like kings. The poorest person in Kuwait, they live like kings. And yet they're not paying. We make it possible for them to sell their oil. Why aren't they paying us 25% of what they're making? It's a joke.
This sounds like political.
Everything he says right there is the things he's been talking about. He's been talking about this. This is the guy that the mainstream media has pointed at and said he's horrible. He's the worst. He's an arrogant, horrible, racist, womanizer, misogynist, and he can't stand, immigration and all. It's unbelievable.
Presidential talk to me, and I know people have talked to you about whether or not you want to run. Would you ever?
Probably not. But I do get tired of seeing the country ripped off.
Why would you not?
I just don't think I really have the inclination to do it. I love what I'm doing. I really like it.
Also, it doesn't pay as well.
No, it doesn't. But, I just probably wouldn't do it, Oprah. I probably wouldn't, but I do get tired of seeing what's happening with this country. And if it got so bad, I would never want to rule it out totally, because I really am tired of seeing what's happening with this country, how we're really making other people live like kings, and we're not.
What do you think of this year's presidential race, the way it's shaping up?
Well, it's going to be very interesting. I think that probably George Bush has an advantage in terms of the election. I think that probably people would say that he's got like that little edge in terms of the incumbency, et cetera, et cetera. But I think Jesse Jackson's done himself very proud. I think Michael Dukakis has done one hell of a job. And George Bush has done a hell of a job. They all went in there sort of as semi-underdogs, including George Bush, and they've all come out. I think people that are around all three of those candidates can be very proud of the jobs they've done.
You've said, though, that if you did run for president, you believe you'd win.
Well, I don't know. I think I'd win. I tell you what, I wouldn't go in to lose. I've never gone in to lose in my life. And if I did decide to do it, I think I'd be inclined. I would say that I would have a hell of a chance of winning, because I think people, I don't know how your audience feels, but I think people are tired of seeing the United States ripped off. And I can't promise you everything, but I can tell you one thing. This country would make one hell of a lot of money from those people that for 25 years have taken advantage. It wouldn't be the way it's been, believe me.
And that right there is the guy that they have decided to rewrite history on.